This episode of The Construction Record is brought to you by the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association. Clean water is everybody's business.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
Nate Bergen from Kinsol Timber Systems, Project Development Manager.
And you specialize in mass timber. And maybe to start with, you give us sort of a background on. I should say you're based in BC, and you have worked on a lot of BC projects. So maybe talk about a few of those first before you branch off into other things.
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. So going back to, I think I'll start at the beginning. I was introduced to the construction industry and mass timber at the same time. I started at a company called Structure Craft Builders, who were based out of Delta at the time, now in Abbotsford. They're well known for producing some pretty world-class structures. And my first project there was working on the Richmond Speedskating Oval. So I spent a good amount of time there, 7+ years, and really cut my teeth on being part of problem solving, how to all the challenges that come with fabricating and assembling mass timber structures in a shop setting. After about seven years or so, I moved on to a company called Seagate Structures, now Seagate Mass Timber, and moved into more of a project manager role, kind of site supervisor, and helped Seagate build up their mass timber portfolio, and we did some pretty cool structures there. Brock Commons was kind of the highlight through that 5 years. And then in 2019, I made another switch over to Kinsol Timber, who's based in Mill Bay, north of Victoria, on Vancouver Island. I'm based in Abbotsford myself. Do most of my work here, and make the trek back and forth. So that's a real quick summary for you.
And for those who don't know, Brock Commons was, and maybe still is, but maybe not, the tallest wood mass timber structure in the world, and it's based on the UBC campus. But you've also gone to work for Google in San Jose on their first mass timber project.
Yes, that's right. Just prior to me starting with Kinsol, Mike Marshall, one of the owners, him and I go back to Structure Craft, actually, where we worked together there. But he had won the project for Kinsol before I started, and it was the first thing I started working on when I joined Kinsol. It was kind of a long haul to get things underway, and the project pushed out through the pandemic as a lot of things did. But we made it down to San Jose earlier this year in February, and we supervised and helped train the local carpenters from a company down there to erect a 5-story, 240,000 square foot office building for Google.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, I would assume, because Google's a huge company, that it would be a bigger project, but Brock Commons and even the Richmond Oval are not exactly small. So I guess the better question is, what were the differences between working down there and working here? Let's say in terms of regulation or in terms of materials you had at hand, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it is quite different. I think California, we're still fairly new to the U.S. market, but California in general is a fairly strict state when it comes to all things safety, which isn't that big of a problem. Just something that you got to be aware of and know the rules. But and in terms of costs, everything in the Bay Area costs more, including labor. So those are challenges that we had to keep top of mind, and it really actually brought to the forefront how important offsite construction is when your on-site burn rate is double or triple what we're typically used to in BC.
And just in terms of culture, I guess, how far ahead is mass timber in California? Because I know Europe's kind of the undisputed leader, but BC's kind of way out there in terms of who's been adapting what. And I don't know if California is or isn't, or the U.S. generally. Did you run into any sort of impediments, or was it easier in some ways?
They're definitely not as far ahead as BC is or Europe, but they're hungry for it, and the crew that we worked with were a great bunch of guys. GC was good to work with as well. They are eager to get involved and to solve the problems, or not so much the problems, but just learn how the nuances of mass timber and become experts. There's certainly a lot of things happening along the West Coast for mass timber, and I don't doubt that the U.S. will catch up to BC before too long, and hopefully we can keep pace with them. But when that comes, we'll see.
And what are some of the advantages of mass timber over other construction? Like, why would Google, or anybody for that matter, but Google specifically, let's say in this case, say we want mass timber in this instance?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good reasons. The one that comes up is environmental reasons, less carbon footprint. Although, as much as that said, what I've seen more often than not is, the mighty dollar speaks to when projects make it or break it. So, mass timber typically has a premium cost to it, depending on which part of the country, what city, kind of where you're building it, will depend on how much it can compete with concrete and steel. Those costs for labor and building those out of those materials changes quite drastically from city to city. So in the Bay Area, I'd say it's fairly competitive. The biggest reason you would, in my mind, that you'd use mass timber is for its ease of construction, and not to say you can't screw up mass timber. There is a ton of pre-construction, pre-planning that goes into it to make it happen well. And yeah, it is important that your crews on site have some training and know how to troubleshoot things as they come up. As much as we don't want to cut timber on site, I've yet to be on a project that we haven't made a little bit of sawdust. But largely, and even for Google, the Google project, we built that 5-story structure in 13-ish weeks, 13 maybe 14. The whole structure from slab on grade to the roof was fully assembled.
And what are some of the unexpected issues that you would say not come up with I hate to say use traditional, but like the standard way, concrete and steel? What is an issue that comes up with mass timber that wouldn't come up with those projects?
Yeah, good question. I don't know that they're, at the end of the day, it's all construction. I'd say, mass timber more frequently, and I don't even know if this is true, but the coordination on mass timber is very intense. So, if you slack off or don't take seriously the pre-planning that's involved up front, you will run into all sorts of collisions and things that you got to deal with on site that could have been solved earlier.
Mhm. Maybe
Yeah.
go further into that about how like this sounds like lean construction in a way. It's all the pre-planning that goes into it, how much communication goes on with the departments that wouldn't otherwise, or
Yeah.
would to a lesser extent, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the coordination often becomes the most challenging between subtrades. So, uh, you know, the Google structure was, slab on grade. Um, Primarily, it was a glulam CLT structure, uh, but there was some fairly substantial steel brace frames um, in the middle of all of our wood frame that we had to both work with the steel sub in terms of accessing the crane, but also ensure that their work was maintaining the same tolerances that we were, uh, so that we weren't pushing things on a plumb or moving in a direction that was going to cause us major problems as we got to the next floor.
And just obviously, you're a pioneer in the space, and many of the sort of showcase projects are of that ilk. But what about, let's say, I guess it's part of that is that it eventually spreads to the rest of the industry. So if somebody's looking to get into mass timber, how do they go about doing that?
So yeah, there's a variety of ways. I'd say you got to do your research. I think no matter which direction you choose, and kind of understand the nuances of mass timber.
Hmm.
I still find it interesting that construction industry is hard to change in terms of what people do what they're comfortable doing, what they've always done doing. I mean, I think that's true for people in general. But um, so um, when on a typical construction project, say for concrete, where it's been you're doing typical details that you've done for years, um, and and mostly you solve any kind of differences on site and deal with change orders, and that's okay. But
Hmm.
if you don't have a shift in your thinking, um, in terms of how to use off-site construction for your benefit, it doesn't give you the benefits that mass timber ought to give you. So, in order to try and bring mass timber costs down to a comparable and competitive value, you have to do the pre-planning up front. If the costs of solving mass timber problems on site, I think, outweigh other types of projects.
And I guess I would ask, what is the future of mass timber construction from this perspective? Like we're seeing these big projects that you've done, but is the future in smaller projects, or is it in even bigger projects, or is it kind of a mix of the two?
Yeah, I think you'll see a mix. In order to get mass timber to the mainstream, uh, it will need to become. It'll need to find its home, somewhere in the mid to high rise construction. I think, uh, office buildings
Hmm.
are sure something that people like to use mass timber for. Um, but the taller buildings that you build, the more efficiency that you gain with mass timber. So, if it's limited to, say, a custom home for a single family, it is quite expensive.
Hmm.
Um, and really the savings are mostly realized when you can reduce your site time, your durations, reduce all your crane time, the labor that it takes to put a structure up. So I think it'll find its home in maybe the 12 to 16 story range. But of course, I think we're going to still see uh, those very cool projects that they're one-off, like the speed skating oval,
Mhm.
stuff like the Swatch building, in Europe, or PJ Curry Dinosaur Museum was another very cool one in Alberta that I
Mhm.
was part of. So those things I think will still exist, but they're not going to fuel the industry.
Right. And I guess personally, what would you like to see? What would you like to work on next in terms of projects? Like, what would your dream project be for mass timber?
And I mean, I love those one-off projects. They're very exciting and cool to work on, but the budgets usually um, don't lend themselves to having them around very often. So
Mhm.
they're nice to have when you get them, but for me, I've been in the industry for 15 years ish, and I'm still not bored of it. There's always something that I'm learning. There's very few projects that I've worked on that are the same, which speaks to one of the issues with the industry, in that there's really no standardization just yet. And I know that's
Mhm.
something um, that I've heard talked about over the years, um, and is something that I think will come once we start seeing projects like the 12 to 16 story that are being built repeated, you know by the same companies. Because if every company in the world does one project, every project's going to look a little different. um,
Mhm.
every architect's got their templates and the way they like to do things, and different engineers. So as we build that consultant base up, around the world, eventually we'll start seeing details shared, and a standard way of doing things will rise to the surface. Not sure when that'll be, though.
Okay. And finally, if people are looking to find out more about Kinsol Timber, where should they go?
Yeah, go to our website, kinsoltimber.com. You can contact myself. I haven't been on that website recently, so I assume all of our contact info is there. Mike Marshall, Steve Stevenson are the two owners of the company, and they are easy to talk to, and extremely helpful. Um, and we can help folks with any kind of project. We've got a pretty large span of projects that we've worked on, from heritage restoration, playgrounds, custom homes, up to large commercial office and residential towers. So we kind of do it all, and we've got a good group of carpenters that really high quality work comes out of those guys.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Nate.
Very good.
This episode of The Construction Record is brought to you by the Greater Toronto Sewer and Water Main Contractors Association. Clean water, our goal, our future.